Serious, have you ever broken off a relationship with someone you really loved because their family was absolutely nuts? What was their family like? We were together 10 years. His mum cried all the time and made everything about her. Her children pooled their money to buy her an expensive TV for Christmas. When she opened it, she burst into miserable tears saying it wouldn't fit her favorite TV cabinet. Then repeated how disappointed she was to all the family all Christmas. She also referred to her daughter-in-law as the vessel that provided her grandchildren. The vessel sounds like a Dark Souls or Hollow Knight boss. Yes, my first wife. Her parents had no concept of boundaries. Her older brother was in and out of rehab all the time. Her sister turned tricks to pay for drugs. We foolishly thought that we'd be able to keep them at arm's length. But she felt guilty and let them pull her back into their dysfunctional f-ked up lives. After a while I couldn't take it anymore and we split. Fortunately we had no children. I'm on the other side of this question. My family are worthless piles of crap who would diss the Pope for attention. I mean, there is something seriously wrong with them and I have no idea why I wasn't infected. Long story short. Brought a girl home I was dating and it went exactly as I thought it would. First thing out of my stepdad's mouth. Doesn't he, pointing at me, have a tiny dick? You should come over here and sit with me. It was like an old school cartoon. Could have sworn I saw dust kick up with how fast she took off out of there. Yes, my ex-husband. I wouldn't say nuts but his whole family had such a different concept of money work from me and how I was raised. They were constantly living above their means and buying ridiculous things. Then when something important came along they had to scramble and borrow. For example, one time his mother borrowed cash from me. A new teacher. Even though she lived abroad in a fancy penthouse with a pool. She told me she'd deposit it in her father's account and I could get it from him. When asked though he said that she had deposited it but then had to take it back. We're talking about like $100 here. I was just baffled. I thought my ex was different until he blew $3k of our wedding gift money. We asked for honeymoon funds in lieu of gifts on a trip he took without me and didn't think to tell me about the missing money. Just that it was no big deal and he'd put it back someday la la la. That was the last straw. Yes, because we found out we were related. So we broke up because of the family. As a result I refuse to date anyone from my state as I feel like I'm probably going to be related to them. Ex's mom heavily recruited me to join her cult where you bow down, literally prostrate like head to the floor kind of thing, to a guru and donate $sign money monthly to fund this guru's lavish lifestyle. Even my ex knew she was nuts. But wasn't willing to stand up to her. Ultimately it just became too much of a problem, couldn't hang out at their house. Arguments over not standing up to her, that I broke it off. And thank goodness. I'm female, best male friend growing up. We'd been friends since middle school. And though he had other girlfriends through high school as we grew up we still remained really close. His family, very traditional Italian, loved me. I spent so many nights at their house and went on family trips with them. When I was 17 I got my first boyfriend. Everything completely changed. I went over for a normal hangout after school and his two sisters, mom and dad, all ganged up on me when he ran to his car. They accused me of using them and told me his sisters married their high school sweethearts. So we had to. I was dumbfounded. And they said that we obviously weren't just friends. They just seemed to have this idea we were soulmates and I explained that we were just not in a marriage sense. I was 17. I didn't even stick with my then boyfriend for long. They even harassed my family after I distanced myself and called me all types of names. We've caught up years later but it hasn't been the same. My first girlfriend when I was 20 was a character but her family was on another level. First time I met her aunt she came to the door in very sheer. At that, bra and panties and then hung out with us like that for a couple of hours. Never put any clothes on. Nobody else seemed bothered by this. I also once saw her aunt and uncle naked in her backyard. basically screwing by the pool while my GFS mom snapped photos. I could go on, but I think this is enough information to convey how crazy these people were. Not the sole reason, but it played a big part. Family is prominent in psychology, so a large part of their interactions are just trying to diagnose each other and those who come into their lives. It also didn't help that the parents of my SO had seemingly been running up a tally on how much it cost to send them to college and raise them, and tried to leverage a $300,000 balance for a payment when they graduated. Oh. But that balance was only a front to motivate their child to become financially independent and or marry into money. So not only did I have to think about how we were compatible, but I was seriously having to consider taking responsibility for paying their parents $300K if I wanted to marry them. I honestly wanted nothing to do with their family as a whole. His parents were divorced and he mainly stayed with his mom, probably because she let him slack off. We would have pretty much the same arguments about our relationship that could get quite heated and wouldn't ever be resolved. I would come over to his house, and while he was in the other room, his mom would come up to me and rant over very personal things I had told him, telling me that I need to pick my battles and I need to do better for her child. I thought it was a really strange overstepping of boundaries, especially because he told her things that I would tell him in confidence. He had some serious mommy issues, and she would talk about herself in the third person, calling herself mommy. Like mommy wants you to vacuum your room today, so all around weird. Breakup wasn't totally over the family, but when considering the future it was a factor, lol. Dad was cool though. Dad was a very old school pastor and his mom was a very timid, religious nut job hoarder. I was only allowed in his parents' house one time to pee before a road trip. When I went in, you couldn't see the floor or countertops because everything was covered in junk. The worst part was that all of the kids grew up just knowing they had to lie to their parents about everything. Example. The kids weren't allowed to live with their spouses before marriage, so all of the older children rented apartments that they never actually lived in just so they could live with their significant others. The kids weren't even allowed to go on dates with their significant others alone. You had to lie and say another sibling would be going with at all times. Oh. And the parents forced one of the siblings to stay with their abusive husband because they didn't believe in divorce. And they just all acted like he'd never beaten her within an inch of her life multiple times. Dodge a bullet getting out of that family for sure. My ex's parents are strict Christians. So strict that the women wear only skirts. Their hair in a braid. No makeup. No tattoos. No skin in general. No piercings. No jewelry. We were in his room and were just going to get something when his mother rushed in. She did not know that her son has a partner. Saw me. Looked at my clothes. Maxi skirt plus a fingertip belly was visible. Yelled at him in Russian. He quickly got out and I went home. His mother had, however, found out the phone number of my mother and complained about me. I was a WH Ray who drive her son into sins. Funny. Since he had already been cheating on me for about 2 months. A guy I really thought would work out had extremely racist parents. His dad would call me Black WH Ray and worthless under his breath constantly. Although he never completely defended them, he often downplayed the seriousness. Which I understood because it's your parents. I get it. But it got to the point where dealing with his parents' verbal abuse was mentally exhausting and made thinking of the future and raising a family with them around horrifying, so I had to let that one go. The mother wanted to get her daughter with nothing short of celebrity and having a BMW 7 to drive at the minimum. And work visa as soon as she landed in US. I paid business class for 5 of them to come visit and basically measure me up. This is some 90-day fiancé shit. I actually had the opposite happen to me. I was in this relationship where my girlfriend was cool most of the time but would often flip out after some perceived disrespect. She would always be apologetic later, but towards the end I felt like I was walking on eggshells. Her family though was amazing. Unlike mine, I looked forward to visiting with them. Her dad and I would shoot pool every week and her siblings were always inviting us to some cool activity. Then one day they invited us to play some mini golf and my girlfriend didn't want to go. I was relieved and realized that the main reason I was still with her was because her family was so awesome. We broke up and I kept in touch with them a bit. But I do miss hanging out with the coolest group of people I ever met. While my ex had plenty of issues himself, I really didn't like his dad. His dad had a massive foot fetish. Now I'm not kink shaming. You do you. Boo. What made it uncomfortable was how unchecked it was. I would have to wear full coverage shoes, like running shoes, at all times at his dad's house. Otherwise his dad would go on and on about how attractive my feet were, or he'd show me photos of his favorite female celebrity feet. I had mentioned to my ex several times how uncomfortable I was with his dad's infatuation with my feet, but he would always shrug and say that's how his dad just was. I don't miss that. Partially. It was more like I broke off my friendship with my best friend growing up because she gave in to the pressure of her nutty family and gradually turned out nasty as well. There's very little you can do from outside. I didn't even realize how completely FK'd that family was until her mother died. Unexpectedly. At 44. And the deadbeat father and entitled firstborn son turned to my 17-year friend to be their cook, nurse, maid, and cash cow. I tried to help her get out of there but she wouldn't listen. She closed off. It was like watching someone being immersed in a cult. Eventually, she turned against me. Last interaction we had was her going off at me, how dared I have a baby when she's infertile. Lost cause. BTW, she wasn't infertile. Just a condition that she was able to treat. From what I know she's on kid no. 5 and counting. One of the reasons I broke up with my first serious boyfriend was because of his family. He came from an Indian, Hindu background and didn't want his parents to know he was dating a white girl. Yes. The stereotype is true. I once sent him a birthday card. His mother found it and apparently freaked the hell out. After 2 years. I didn't want to be a part of that anymore. It was far from the only reason. But it was a factor. I did. For more reasons than that, but yes. Her mother was an incredibly bad influence on her. The mother was as mad as a box of frogs and really poor judge of character. So she would pick nut job men who would do stuff to her that actually endangered her life on a regular basis. I would then be called and expected to bail her out of trouble. Got a call at 3 AM. To fetch this woman who had been left on the side of the highway. Drunk out of her mind by her ejective boyfriend. She was an hour out of town in the middle of nowhere. On a weeknight. This sort of thing used to happen with monotonous regularity. Eventually I just gave up. This happened in a crime-ridden country in Africa. I dated a young woman who came from a family of extremely devout atheists. Yes. Devout atheists. Their entire thing was telling everyone about their atheism. How stupid all religious people were, and how logic and reason were the sole measure we should be judged by. Simultaneously, they were also afraid of cell phone radiation. Insisted that the paleo diet was the only real way to eat. Didn't believe in personal privacy. Didn't believe showering every day was necessary and also saw it as their place to judge everyone who didn't conform to their very narrow lifestyle choices. Like, I'm an atheist but those people were f***ing crazy. I got sick of the criticisms and having to debunk the asinine beliefs they were instilling in their daughter and left. Sounds like they were just extremely contrarian. Some people deliberately go against the grain in order to sustain perpetual victimhood and or a superiority complex. Slightly off topic, when I first met my wife, she wasn't on speaking terms with her family. I really didn't meet her folks until after we were married and had produced the first grandchild. Her family is nuts. But she's not like them and managed to escape, so to speak. An ex-girlfriend's family was living under an assumed last name. She had a kid sister who was about 10 if I remember correctly. The moment stepdad would not enroll her in school, public or private, and she was forced to sleep in their room at night. I got a really bad vibe about the whole family and cut ties. Money was a constant problem and no one seemed to have jobs. I never looked back. A friend in middle school had a mother that was very controlling. She acted nice and sweet towards me, but would try anything she could to distance her daughter from me so that she could be around more popular girls or something along those lines. I wasn't exactly the best or most popular. I was a quiet nerdy girl with ADHD. My mom revealed this to me one day and it crushed me. It somewhat damaged my relationship with her. He broke up with me, but I made the choice to walk away entirely despite him asking us to take a look at it and give it another go. His family is extremely toxic, codependent, and his mother is straight up narcissistic and a cancer to his life. They would never, ever apologize for what they did to me, our relationship, any of it. So when he tried to come crawling back, I said no, healed, and moved on with my life. I loved that man and wanted forever with him, but I refused to live my whole life with people willing to cause great mental harm to me and my child for the mere sin of establishing and sticking to boundaries. Her mother took a loan from shady loan sharks in order to loan the money to her aunt at a higher rate. Her aunt then refused to pay the money back. Her mother decided to skip town and go into hiding, taking her 12-year-old sister out of school to go with her. My girlfriend was an adult and independent from her mother, but she went along with her crazy shitty out of loyalty, being manipulated, and went with her into hiding. We were talking marriage and kids, but I knew that her mother would have influence over the kids and I couldn't put them, or myself, into that spot. My ex. On top of him cheating, his family was pretty crazy, especially the dad. I have a physical disability and both his parents were pretty ableist. Would address me with slurs at times and would talk smack every chance they got. And they kept saying I'm the reason their son is on the wrong path. I remember first visiting their house and his dad never said a single thing to me the moment he saw my disability. Honestly, the relationship was doomed from the start because of his parents. I looked past that because I really thought the guy was alright. Apparently not as well. Phil told me he was going to beat my skull in with a baseball bat after we got engaged. We broke it off briefly after that. Ultimately got married. Tried to make amends a few times with her fam in an attempt to have that normal extended family relationship. Unfortunately, mental health issues ran deep and the death threats never stopped. Happily live in another part of the country without much contact now. XGF likes to eat the banana peels. I dated my ex for 3 years. One of the biggest barriers between us was that her family was very Catholic and I am not Catholic. Her parents seemed to think the relationship would not last. But as it continued for longer and longer, they started to take more drastic actions. At first they tried to convince her that the difference in lifestyles would not be compatible. Then they got her uncle, who is an archbishop in the Catholic Church, 2 steps away from Pope, to let her know that essentially she would be going to hell. Finally, her mother went into a catatonic state, in which she didn't get out of bed, eat, or drink for 3 days. Finally it got to the point where I realized you should not marry into crazy. No. But in hindsight what an old man said to me turned out to be true. Pay attention to the dynamic of the father and mother because 9 out of 10 times that's what you're buying into. What a wise man. I have not broken off a relationship for this reason. But I am a woman married for over 20 years. I implore you to please consider how much your spouse's family of origin will affect the rest of your life. Red flags that I saw in 1998 have not changed or gotten better. First impressions count. The way they see you at the beginning of your relationship, even if they got the wrong idea, often turns out to be the way they will always see you. Well, I didn't break it off solely because her folks were batshot crazy, but it definitely didn't help. Main reason for ending it was she simply didn't love me anymore even though I loved her a great deal. But the whole time we dated her mom was extremely controlling and when she didn't get her way she would blame everything on me and try to keep us apart. There were times her mom would call threatening to call the police on me for kidnapping her when we would go out on a date if we didn't drive all the way back to her house to get her card to go buy her cigarettes or whatever else she could think of. As time wore on, she didn't go to those extremes as often, but she didn't stop completely.